Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. I'm your host, Gorgeous George. And as always, I got some of the best in the biz here with me. Mike Bond from Toronto, Danny Segura from Miami, and Matt Wells in the Big D, Dallas, Texas. Cold coffee is on the ones and twos. Let's get to it, guys. So listen, man, Jorge Masvidal, Colby Covington, the rivalry continues, except it was outside the octagon last week when Masvidal allegedly attacked Covington outside of a Miami steakhouse. About 48 hours later, Masvidal was arrested and booked. He faces 2 charges, 1 count of aggravated battery resulting in bodily harm, and 1 count of criminal mischief. A few more details have trickled in since then, but I want to hear your reaction to all this as it has unfolded. Mike, get things started. 4 minutes.
I mean, obviously, it's not ideal. You don't want UFC fighters going out and hitting each other and getting in fights in public. I mean, I think that kind of goes without saying here. Jorge Masvidal obviously set a precursor to this, that something like this may happen if he runs into Colby Covington in the Miami area. And I guess for his part, he kept true to his word. This is obviously not something Jorge Masvidal is foreign to doing, going back all the way to, the Kimbo Slice street fighting days. We saw what happened with Leon Edwards, the famous 3-piece Minnesota incident. So I don't think anyone is surprised that Jorge Masvidal would punch someone outside of the octagon, but I do not think personally it was a very good decision for him. Whether he ends up seeing, the inside of a jail cell for these alleged actions or not remains to be seen. But obviously, I think more so than anything, this is going to probably cost him pretty significant financial reparations, whether it's to Colby Covington or legal fees, whatever the case may be. I think he's going to be hit hardest in the pocket when it comes to this. Obviously, the fight did not satisfy whatever urge Jorge Masvidal needed, and the things he was upset about that Colby Covington said about him being, a deadbeat dad, and all these other kind of personal attacks that went into family and child territory, things like that. So I guess, when Colby Covington talks as much as he does and says the things he does, maybe you have to expect this in a way, but Jorge Masvidal is a guy that will go do something like this. So yeah, I mean, it kind of is what it is at this point. I do not think it was an advisable move for Jorge, but he did it, and here we are.
Yep, they both said on site, and they weren't lying. Danny Segura, you're in ground zero, man. You're in the 305 quite a lot. Did this surprise you? What was your reaction?
It didn't surprise me because, as Mike mentioned, like Jorge Masvidal said that this was going to happen. I think my biggest surprise was the reaction from the fan base, because when this happened to Leon Edwards, a few months ago or a couple years ago, it wasn't this reaction. If anything, everybody was praising Jorge and, oh, look how funny, 3-piece in the soda, this and that. And nobody was sort of feeling bad for Leon Edwards, but it happens to Colby Covington, and all of a sudden, Jorge Masvidal is like the worst person in the world, this and that. And I'm not by any means excusing Jorge Masvidal. I think any violence outside of the octagon, obviously, I have to condone it, and I don't think it's good. But like, what do you expect? I mean, you cross the lines on trash talk. You talk about a man's kids and stuff like that, and you really push it. Not only did he beat Masvidal, but following that, literally almost every day, he was making an Instagram post with a different photo of the fight, trashing on Masvidal and just continuing to egg on him. So what do you think is going to happen? And it's no coincidence. I know that Colby's the victim here legally, but like there's no coincidence that he had an issue with Fabricio Verdum, Ali Abdelaziz, and Kamaru Usman in Las Vegas as well. It's no coincidence that this keeps happening to Colby Covington. And I'm not surprised that it happened, and I wouldn't be surprised if it happens again, because if you continue to cross the lines, things like that will happen, and you're going to have to bear the consequences. But both fighters here are paying the consequences. One, Colby for his words, and Masvidal for his actions. So not surprised that this happened.
All right, Matt Wells, we're a little short on time. Give me your take.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where you can kind of see both sides of the situation here. Colby crossed the line with the words, and Jorge crossed the lines with his actions. Colby should have known, when you invite that sort of thing, saying, see me in the streets, all this sort of thing, then talk about family. A guy like Jorge Masvidal is going to take that, and he's going to really bring it to the streets. So you asked for it, you got it. I agree with what Mike said. You don't want to see fighters kind of take things into their own hands into the streets like this. But hey, Colby invited it, and Jorge called his bluff on it. So here we are.
I wonder if all this leads to a part 2. We got a definitive part 1, but you just never know. All right. Topic 2. Former UFC flyweight champion Demetrious Johnson defeated one flyweight Muay Thai champion Rodtang Jitmunyang in a hybrid fight that alternated Muay Thai and MMA rules using 3-minute rounds. The first round was Muay Thai, the second round was MMA, and so on is how it should have played out. However, the fight ended in the second round as Johnson submitted Rodtang via rear naked choke. What was your takeaway from this unique fight? 4 minutes are on the clock. Danny, hit it.
I think a few things. One, that Demetrious Johnson is awesome. He might be fighting, very far from America, so sometimes he's a little bit forgotten, but I think he's still very much a very solid fighter. And sometimes I wonder how he would fare in today's flyweight division, which is looking very good, by the way. And also, I kind of liked it. I kind of enjoyed the novelty of it, but I'm not entirely sold that this is something that I want to see moving forward, kind of like a norm of mixed rules. I like my MMA. I like my kickboxing, my Muay Thai, my jiu-jitsu, my boxing. I like it all separate. I don't like the morphing of the rules. So in this isolated incident, it was cool. It was awesome. But I want to see Demetrious Johnson fight at what he's best, which is MMA, and obviously Rodtang in Muay Thai, because that's where he shines best. So all in all, it was kind of cool experience. But I think hopefully this is it for one as far as those mixed bouts.
I feel you, man. Just once in a while is good enough, but this one was a nice dose of it. Matt Wells, Demetrious Johnson's done it all, man. But did this add a little to the legacy?
I think it added a little bit. The fight was fun to watch. I mean, that if anything, like, he proved that I'm going to stand and trade, in the Muay Thai round. Of course, he was on his bike a lot, like I kind of suggested that he should be. I mean, that was a smart thing. The thing for me, though, is that you watch the fight, Rodtang was pushing forward the entire first round, and then when it switched to MMA, Rodtang was on his bike. So, they both knew the dangers that they were facing. So it was pretty fun to watch in that aspect, just to see the differences. But at the end of the day, we didn't really learn anything, I don't think, because at the end of the day, in the MMA rounds, the MMA guy won. It's the same thing like that we see in every time we do these sort of mixed rules bouts and things like that. The guy with the more dominant skill set is going to win when the skill set benefits him. So I don't think we learned too much, but it was pretty cool to see DJ go in there and hang with him for the first round, fire back, even though he was getting caught with some shots as well. So I don't know exactly how much this adds to his legacy, because we already consider DJ one of the greatest to ever do it. So it was just a fun thing. Now let's see him get back in there for another title shot, in strictly MMA.
Kind of nice for MMA to get a dub too, man. Sometimes we get slapped around when we play nice with the other sports. How about you, Mike Bond? What was your takeaway?
I thought it was enjoyable. I mean, I woke up early in the morning, whatever time it was on Saturday, and watched this fight, and I did not regret doing so for a minute. I thought, the build up to it was well done. I thought the rule sets in terms of how they set this fight up was pretty straightforward, and I think the fight itself went probably how we all should have expected. I mean, that first round was a lot of fun, seeing Demetrious Johnson trying to kind of fight Rodtang and then also fight his own instincts when things like, Rodtang would come in with a big kick or some heavy punches, and he would almost go into like a clinch takedown, or just some of these like reactionary moves that we've seen out of Demetrious Johnson in these type of exchanges so many times throughout his career. So seeing him navigate that was pretty enjoyable. And then when he went out there in round 2, he did exactly what he needed to and should have done. And, credit to Rodtang for not tapping and going out cold. He kind of got the full experience of the MMA submission there. So, I thought it came off pretty well for one. I thought this was a success. The website traffic and the social media engagement we had around this fight was as good as anything that happened from the UFC or any other corner of the martial arts world over this weekend. So I think in that, aspect, it was a raging success for one. I don't think this is something you want to roll out there every single event, but it's something that you can do on these special monumental fight cards with two fighters that work together well in this situation. And I think it'll become just as successful the next time as it was this. So I liked it. I'm down for more of it. And congrats to Demetrious Johnson.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, guys, if Rodtang wants to do some more MMA, I'm in for that too. All right. Let's move on here. Curtis Blaydes defeated Chris Dawkins at UFC on ESPN 33 in Columbus. Razor, known for his wrestling game, didn't attempt a single takedown in round 1, and he TKO'd the heavy-handed X-Cup 17 seconds into round 2. Afterwards, he mentioned Cyril Gane for an interim belt. Then he pivoted, touch of gloves, to Daniel Cormier, to Stipe Miocic. It was a respectful call out of the former UFC heavyweight champion, who was busy taking selfies while all this was happening. But listen, man, guys, the heavyweight division's a mess. We've been through this with Tai Tuivasa, Aspinall. You know, there's egos, injuries, contract disputes. I don't want to get into that. Let's zero in on Curtis Blaydes. Did he do enough for a title shot, or at least to maybe be considered for a title shot? Matt, start things off.
He looked good, but no, he's got, in my opinion, I think he has 2 more wins to go before he finds himself in another title shot. And the reason is because he's gotten there before a couple of times, and then he's just faltered. So to make it happen, like, I guess, so on this, maybe like this third attempt to crack through for a title shot, he's going to have to really convince people. I mean, this knockout was fantastic, don't get me wrong. But then at the end of the fight, you kind of downplayed your victory by saying, hey, this guy should be fighting at 205. So you kind of diminished your own victory there a little bit by saying that. But he's really got to go out there and do it against one of those bigger names that we are confused about how this is all going to shake out. The Cyril Ganes, the Stipe Miocic, the Tai Tuivasas, now the Tom Aspinalls. We don't know what's going on with John Jones. Get wins over those guys, and then make it look good as well. You know, hey, show you can do it without the wrestling against one of those guys too. Then people will get on board with the title shot. But in my opinion, he's got 2 more to go.
Well, one thing he definitely has is time on his side. He's only 31. It seems like he's been fighting for a decade. Mike, what's your take on Curtis Blaydes? What do you think is the path for him to get to the title shot?
It's so hard to say right now because, as we kind of laid out, division is a mess. As soon as they book the interim title fight, which we are presumably getting it now that Francis Ngannou has had his surgery and is likely to be out for the remainder of the year, once they pick those 2 fighters, whether it's John Jones and Stipe and Cyril Gane, maybe Tai Tuivasa goes in there, I think the path for Curtis Blaydes becomes much more clear because we know who's going to ultimately be where with these fights. So for him, I think it's really hard to say the exact path right now, but I agree with Matt. It's 1, maybe 2 more wins, especially if he can do it like he just did, not going out there and just, grinding the guy out for 3 rounds or to a late finish via, ground strikes or something like that. These wins are always going to do him better and be more spectacular if he can get a standing finish. So props to him for kind of going out there and rolling the dice and getting the ball rolling on making these kinds of wins happen for him. So yeah, I think it's hard to know exactly, but I think he's in a really good position. Heck, I mean, these things can happen with big fights falling through. Maybe they don't get John Jones. Maybe they can't get Stipe on the right deal or the right timing. And maybe Curtis Blaydes gets the phone call anyways. I would not rule that out 100% and maybe landing in that interim title fight. But I think he's probably sitting near the back of the line when it comes to the top options, but he made a good case for himself. So I think you got to be pretty happy for Curtis Blaydes right now. He's at a good spot.
Spot on, Mike Bond. Just be ready because they are going to have to make an interim title shot. Why not be one of the 2 who also enjoys pay-per-view cuts when it's time to unify versus Big Fran? Danny Segura, wrap things up, man. What do you see for Curtis Blaydes?
Yeah, I think he was pretty honest about his assessment going into this fight, and I think it was pretty accurate, which is like, what I'm doing here is just maintaining my spot. He's not fighting for the belt. He's not fighting for an opportunity for the shot in that main event against Chris Daukaus. And that's exactly what he did. He looked good. He maintained his spot, and he remains among the top heavyweights in that division. But as far as him being next, no, I think there's people that are ahead. Obviously, we got the premier of the premier names, which will obviously involve John Jones, Stipe Miocic, as far as a interim title. And then right behind that, you have Tom Aspinall and Tai Tuivasa, who have been doing a spectacular job. And I think there's another tier below that, which is the Curtis Blaydes and fighters like that, who are obviously doing a great job, but are just not there yet. So I think just patience, keep at it, rack up another win or 2 while the whatever is going on top gets resolved, and just be ready. Also, you, as Mike mentioned, you never know when that phone call might come in. So just be ready and keep maintaining your spot. That's what I would tell Curtis Blaydes.
Yeah, it also doesn't help that he's 0-2 against the current champ. So he kind of needs that to maybe go away. And then he's, maybe it'll get easier to get that third fight booking. All right. Moving on, after taking in 1X and UFC on ESPN 33 this past weekend, give me a name outside of the fights that we kind of discussed right now. So the Blaydes fight, the Demetrious Johnson fight. Give me one that had an impact performance. We got 4 minutes on the clock. We're back to Mike Bond in Toronto.
For me, it's Kai France, right? Like that was, I think, of the weekend. You could even argue over the main event of Curtis Blaydes and Chris Daukaus, the most important fight in terms of UFC title stakes on that UFC on ESPN 33 card. A huge fight between Kai France and Askar Askarov in the flyweight division, a title eliminator in my book. And whether you think Kai France deserved the split decision or not, it was a very competitive, close fight, especially after a rough start for him where he got his back taken the entire first round. He was able to get back in there, make those final 2 rounds extremely competitive, and convince 2 of the 3 judges to give them to him. So credit to him for that. And this is a guy that, has been the underdog in some of these fights, and he goes out there and knocks out Cody Garbrandt in the first round, ends Askarov's unbeaten run. So I think Kai France has done more than enough to earn his UFC title shot. And it's just a matter of, did he do enough to maybe force a reshuffling of the deck? We see Davis at Figueiredo, or whoever was running Davis at Figueiredo's Twitter account on Saturday night, saying that he wants the fight with Kai France over that 4th Brandon Moreno fight. I don't know if that's going to be the direction it goes. It seems like the UFC does want to do part 4 for the belt, maybe, this summer. But either way, I think Kai France has deserved the chance to wait for the winner of that sometime later this year. Maybe when they go back to the Oceania region, share a car with Izzy or something like that. Could be big time stuff. So congrats to Kai France. I think he's getting a title shot at 125.
That definitely is a good one, man. I really like that fight. Kai France, huge statement. How about you, Danny Segura? What was your impactful fight of the weekend?
I'm going to do a sort of 2-for-1 package here and shout out 2 of the ladies at 125 pounds, Alexa Grasso and Manon Fiorot. I think they look great on fight night. I think Grasso obviously doing something historic for her career and picking up her first submission win. I think it was something needed. Obviously, you look at the division and it's kind of just been this reoccurring thing that the champion, it's like a given, right? The champion, Valentina Shevchenko, is just going to defend her belt no matter what. So when you have these contenders coming up and kind of building the resume for a shot, it's kind of nice that they're showing new wrinkles, because it makes the argument of, hey, maybe they can do something here and dethrone the champ a little bit more compelling. Obviously, there's still a lot of work to be done because Shevchenko has looked indestructible, but clearly Grasso is evolving and showing new facets of her game. So that was enjoyable. And Fiorot, she's a nice prospect coming up. I mean, had a really good win over Jennifer Maia. And I do like this new crop that's coming up at 125 pounds. So Valentina looks indestructible, but these fighters are evolving as well. So we'll see how things look in a year from now or so. But 2 ladies that are doing fantastic work at 125.
All right, good stuff. Matt Wells, I think we still left you a lot to pick from, man. What was your impactful fight from the weekend?
Will Smith and Chris Rock was my number 1. Sticking with the UFC, though, I will say Neil Magny. You got to give him props, man. He tied GSP for the most wins in welterweight history at 19. It was an exciting fight against Max Griffin as well. It was my pick for fight of the night until we got to Brian Barberina versus Matt Brown, which was incredible. If you haven't watched it, go see that. But Neil Magny, man, he always proves that he's gonna get touched, but you're gonna touch him and he's gonna come back harder and keep coming back harder and keep coming back harder. And he does that every single time out. And then you also take into the fact that the guy is always in the octagon. He always fights. And you gotta love that. The same reason people always love Cowboy Cerrone for fighting so often. Neil Magny is that same guy. So I love to give guys like that props that show up and perform every time. He's hovering right around the middle of the division right now in the top 15. So he's always going to give you fun fights. So you got to give him props. And of course, tying that record is a huge feather in his cap as well. So shout out to Neil Magny.
I like it. Good stuff, guys. My personal one was Hannah de Ritter versus Andre Galvao, man. They grappled their ass off for 50 minutes. De Ritter hung with him. He didn't get submitted. So that's pretty cool when you can hang with an Abu Dhabi world champion. All right, topic 5. The UFC's return to Columbus was definitely a success. On the heels of the massive London show the weekend before, you have to feel the UFC is going to start taking the show back on the road, pandemic permitting. What in particular have you enjoyed about having the full arenas, and what will you miss about having less shows at the UFC's Apex. Now, I'm going to take one thing off the table. Don't give me the whole crowd thing. Sneak it in there if you want, but there has to be something else that your eyes have captivated. But all you guys have covered the sport for a long time. Danny Segura, give me some good stuff.
The crowd. I'm just kidding, George. But no, I would have to say that like there's so many layers that comes with having an event outside of the UFC Apex. One of the things that I clearly notice is how fighters come across. I mean, once you put them in their natural element, those hometown guys, I mean, they just come off as superstars. And I think that's something that we're robbed from when we have the fights in Vegas. Like, sure,
Yeah.
Paddy Pimblett's debut at the UFC Apex, sure, it was nice. Obviously, you see there's something here, a little bit of that it factor, potential star in the making. But once you see him in the UK, once you see him fighting in London, perhaps not his home city, but his home country, and you see the crowd reaction when he walks out, you see the walkout, you see how the crowd responds to his wins, his strikes, you see the fighter, the energy that they're getting from the crowd as well. I mean, it's just a completely different experience. And clearly you see the stardom, you see why people are talking about this guy. And same thing you can say about Matt Brown. I know that he didn't necessarily get the result that he wanted. It was a split decision loss against Brian Barberena. But all throughout and even at post, you know, Brian Barberena getting booed after such an amazing fight, that just clearly speaks on how much people love Matt Brown and what he means to Columbus, right, and to Ohio, and just, you know, fighting in his home territory. So that's what I like, that we see more shine from these fighters when they're fighting in their hometowns.
The hometown love. I love it. All right. How about you, Matt?
It's one of those things, man, where I love both aspects. I love the full arenas. You love the intensity, like the roar of the crowd when, you know, big moments happen. You love that sort of thing, and you love to hear them erupt when a finish happens. But at the same time, I also love just like the intimacy of an empty arena. You know, there was a show that they did back at the Cosmo a while back when Rose Namajunas fought Paige Van Zandt. And like, there was something special about being in that smaller arena where you could hear literally everything. You can hear the cornermen, you know, shouting instructions. You can hear every strike, every grunt. You can hear all of that. But man, it's hard not to say that you favor the crowds more. Just the intensity, like the feeling, like your ears start pounding when everybody starts yelling. I think I prefer that a little bit more. But they're both special. They both have a place. But personally, I want to see them get back on the road more for more of these fight nights, man, because that's what we're used to. And that's where I think we should go. But also, give me an Apex show every now and then, too.
All right. And we'll finish up with Mike, who had the experience of being at one of these shows, rocking the wig and everything. I loved it. Good stuff from Mike Bond, as always. Mike, what's your take here?
Yeah, I mean, I think these guys touched on basically it all. I know, you don't want to emphasize too much on the crowd, but that's what does really make or break it. I mean, I got being out there at UFC London, which was one of the best cards I could ever recall being cage side for. You got all the positives of that experience. I mean, the walkouts, the crowd singing, the European element of it, with them being so passionate for their local fan or their local fighters. I mean, what more can you ask for? And it's just not being on the road into like a foreign city like that. Obviously we had Abu Dhabi, but it just wasn't the same. It was such small capacity in the few times they did have crowds that you just didn't feel that same energy. And going to a city, seeing the fighters, walking around outside the hotel and various other places, it just gives you an excitement that you don't have with these Apex cards just week after week after week. And I think some of the things that we really liked about the Apex shows, the facts that you can hear corners, you can hear strikes being landed louder and things like that, maybe slightly overrated, in my opinion. I mean, how many times can we count like these real amazing gems we've got from the corner just because we've heard the audio? You heard Curtis Blaydes' punch on Chris Dawkins as loud as any punch we've heard in the Apex when there's no crowd. So I think it should be this moving forward. I hope we get more of it and the Apex shows kind of start to fall by the wayside.
You guys are absolutely right. Yellow card to me. I shouldn't have taken the crowd out because the crowd it should have been part of every answer because that's what made it very, very special. You guys were spot on. Heck, I even think that just the gate alone and the crowd is what gave Dana White, he was so generous with 9 bonuses. Holy cow, I thought that was good. But I do love hearing those instructions from the cornermen. I also like the Apex because it's a smaller octagon. which is supposed to create more action. I don't know. All right. You guys did outstanding as always. And of course, we got you locked in here at MMA Junkie throughout the week, covering the great sport of mixed martial arts. We'll have 5 new topics next week here on the Spinning Back Clique.